I always believed the cruelest betrayal would come from a spouse, until my best friend of 15 years looked me in the eye, shedding perfect crocodile tears, and vividly described my husband kissing another woman. Her only fatal flaw: she had no idea that on the exact stormy night of her fabricated tale, my husband was locked inside a sterile, dead zone security room with me. She wanted a tragedy for entertainment, so I directed her a nightmare. Hello, dear listeners of Zoe Revenge Stories, and thank you so much for your continued support. Our channel was recently demonetized by YouTube, leaving us with no budget to operate. So if you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 to help pay our hardworking staff so they can afford their living expenses and keep creating for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code right on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link down in the description or the pinned comment. My name is Allison Ferguson. I am 32 years old and working as a strategy director for Ethos Dynamics, a major tech firm here in Denver. My daily life revolves around risk assessment, identifying patterns, and anticipating failures before they ever happen. I have always applied that same rigorous logic to my personal life. That stability extended perfectly to my marriage with my husband, Marcus. We had the kind of solid, quiet, and deeply comfortable relationship that did not require grand social media declarations to prove it existed. I trusted him completely, and he grounded me. It was a fortress of a life, immune to the usual dramatic storms of modern romance. Everything shifted on a completely ordinary Saturday afternoon. My best friend of 15 years, Vanessa, texted me demanding an urgent meetup at our favorite corner cafe. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a small table near the back, clutching a cup of chamomile tea with both hands. She looked absolutely terrible. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her hands were visibly trembling, and she carried the heavy, suffocating posture of someone about to deliver a terminal medical diagnosis. "Allison," she began, her voice cracking perfectly on the second syllable of my name. She reached across the wooden table, grabbing both of my hands in hers with a desperate grip. "I do not know how to tell you this, but I cannot keep it a secret anymore. I love you too much to let you live a lie." I sat perfectly still, waiting. "It is about Marcus," she whispered, a single tear slipping down her cheek with flawless, cinematic precision. "I saw him last Tuesday night. He was in the parking lot of the Velvet Lounge. He was kissing someone, Allison, a woman with bright red hair. They were practically pulling each other's clothes off against the side of his car." She did not stop there. The brilliance of a truly great liar lies in the sensory details. And Vanessa was an absolute artist. She painted a picture so vivid, it was meant to bypass logic and strike directly at the heart. She described the exact charcoal gray wool coat Marcus wore, the one I had bought him for our anniversary. She recited the letters and numbers of his license plate to ensure I knew it was not a simple case of mistaken identity. "It was exactly 10:30 in the evening," she sobbed, squeezing my fingers so hard her knuckles turned white. "I swear to you, I looked at my watch because I could not believe my own eyes. I stayed hidden behind a pillar. I am so sorry, Allison. I am so sorry." I sat there listening to her every word. Externally, my facial expression froze into a perfect mask of shock and devastation. Internally, however, the blood in my veins turned to absolute ice. My heart pounded furiously against my ribs. But the sharp nausea washing over me had absolutely nothing to do with my husband. It had everything to do with the woman sitting across from me. I felt sick because of the cold, terrifying malice radiating from my supposedly loyal best friend. Because here is the undeniable, a concrete truth about last Tuesday night. Denver was hit by a record-breaking super blizzard. The entire city was paralyzed under feet of snow. Marcus, being the incredibly devoted man he is, had braved the very beginning of the storm to bring me a hot dinner at the Ethos Dynamics headquarters, because I was stuck finalizing a massive quarterly report. By the time he arrived with the food, the city officials had declared all roads impassable. The two of us were completely trapped inside the building. At exactly 10:30 that evening, the precise time Vanessa claimed he was at an upscale bar, Marcus and I were bundled together under a heavy thermal emergency blanket. We were sharing a deflated air mattress on the cold floor of the server room, completely cut off from cell service, right alongside the building's overnight security team. We did not leave that secure, sterile room until noon the following day. Marcus was not kissing a redhead in a parking lot. He was feeding me cold French fries in the dark while we listened to the wind howling against the reinforced glass windows. Yet, here was Vanessa, looking me dead in the eye, weeping bitter tears over a betrayal she had completely manufactured out of thin air. She was intensely studying my face, waiting for the exact moment I would shatter into a million pieces. She wanted to watch my perfect life burn down to the ground just to keep herself entertained. I slowly pulled my hands out of her tight grip, took a shaky, deep breath, and prepared to give her exactly the spectacular performance she wanted. I did not throw my hot tea in her face. I did not scream, nor did I demand she explain the physical impossibility of her ridiculous story. Instead, I let my shoulders collapse inward. I buried my face deep into my hands and forced my breathing to become jagged and shallow. The tears came surprisingly easy, born not from heartbreak, but from a potent mix of adrenaline and sheer, cold-blooded outrage. I wept into my palms, playing the role of the shattered, naive wife she so desperately needed me to be. I felt her hand reaching across the table, rubbing slow circles on my back, her voice murmuring empty, soothing platitudes. She was comforting me over the exact wound she was trying to inflict. It was a terrifying display of sociopathy. I needed to keep my head down, hide my frozen expression, and see exactly how far she would take this script. When I returned to our house 2 hours later, the silence of our home felt different, heavy with an unseen threat. I walked straight into Marcus's home office and quietly shut the heavy oak door behind me. I recounted the entire cafe conversation word for word, watching his expression morph from mild confusion to utter disbelief, and finally, to a quiet, hardening anger. "But we were together," he stated plainly, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. "In the server room, with the entire night security detail. Why on earth would she invent a story that is so easily disproved?" "Because she does not know it can be disproved," I replied, leaning against the edge of his mahogany desk. "She thinks I was working late alone on the 12th floor and you were out in the city. She is banking entirely on my blind trust in her. But the real question is why? Why try to detonate a perfectly good marriage?" Right then and there, Marcus and I made a silent, ironclad pact. We would not confront her. We would not demand apologies or explanations. We would become ghosts in our own lives, moving silently, watching her every move from the shadows to uncover the actual motive driving this grotesque sabotage. We were no longer husband and wife dealing with a friend. We were investigators hunting a predator. We started with the most obvious surface level, analyzing her social media and financial footprints. Vanessa had been laid off from her mid-level marketing job exactly 8 months ago. By all logical metrics, she should have been tightening her belt and actively job hunting. Instead, her digital presence painted a baffling picture of sudden, inexplicable wealth. Over the last 90 days, she had checked into 3 different luxury wellness retreats. She was casually posting photos featuring designer bags that cost upwards of $4,000. "Look at this," Marcus pointed at my laptop screen late one evening, the blue light illuminating his sharp features. "She is wearing a solid gold Cartier watch in this photo from last Tuesday, the same Tuesday she supposedly saw me at the bar. How is a woman with zero income funding a lifestyle that requires a 6-figure salary?" To find out, I had to dig much deeper than public Instagram posts. Working as a strategy director at a massive tech firm has its perks, mainly access to brilliant people who know how to navigate the unseen architecture of the internet. I called in a highly confidential favor from our senior data architect, a man who treated digital privacy walls like minor inconveniences. I handed him a list of Vanessa's email addresses and public handles. asking him to quietly look for any hidden revenue streams, offshore servers, or secondary online identities. 3 days later, he handed me a secure, encrypted flash drive. We sat in the dark of our living room, plugging it into a burner laptop. The contents were chilling. Vanessa had recently placed several massive orders through specialized, high-end audio equipment retailers. She had purchased top-of-the-line studio microphones, acoustic soundproofing materials, and advanced multi-channel mixing boards. But the most damning piece of evidence was a financial routing connection to a creator platform called Patreon. She had established a completely anonymous creator account that was experiencing an explosive, almost violent surge in monthly paid subscribers. According to the raw data files my colleague had pulled, she had amassed over 25,000 paying members in the span of just 6 months. If even a fraction of those subscribers were paying the premium tier of $15 a month, she was pulling in a staggering amount of hidden, untraceable income. But what exactly was she selling to command that kind of an audience? The answer lay buried in the associated web links tied to that financial account. The routing pointed directly to a wildly popular, true crime-style drama podcast that had been aggressively dominating the top charts for the past year. The podcast was called Shattered Vows. It was a highly produced, slick, and utterly venomous audio show hosted by an anonymous woman with digitally altered, distorted vocals. The entire premise of the show was built on exposing, exploiting, and commercializing the marital tragedies, infidelities, and scandalous divorces of the upper middle class. And my best friend, the woman who had held my hands and cried with me over a fake affair, was the invisible puppet master pulling the strings, turning the private agony of her own inner circle into a highly profitable, binge-worthy empire. I locked the heavy bedroom door behind me and slid my noise-canceling headphones over my ears. The house was dead silent, but my head was about to be filled with absolute poison. I turned the volume down low, as if the audio itself could somehow contaminate the room, and clicked play on the very first episode of Shattered Vows. The host's voice was digitally warped, dropped an octave to sound sultry and detached, but the cadence, the slight pause before a punchline, the sharp intake of breath, was unmistakably Vanessa. As I scrubbed through the massive catalog of the past 12 months, a sickening realization washed over me. She had not just targeted me, she had systematically strip-mined our entire mutual friend group. I listened in growing horror as the darkest, most fiercely guarded secrets of the people we loved were served up with dramatic background music and sponsored advertisement reads. There was an episode about a devastating miscarriage, twisted and spun into a salacious tale of a husband's cold neglect. There was a dramatic multi-part series on a private bankruptcy that nearly drove one of our college friends to the absolute brink of despair. Vanessa had packaged their private agony into bite-sized, consumable trauma for the internet. She even spliced their sobbing phone calls made to her in the strictest of confidence, into the audio track, masking the voices just enough to avoid legal trouble but leaving the raw, bleeding emotion completely intact. She would interrupt a story about our friend's clinical depression to cheerfully read an advertisement for custom vitamins. It was a spectacular display of moral decay, a grotesque monument to what empty people will do for clout and cash in the modern digital age. But absolutely nothing prepared me for the most recent upload. The title was The Perfect Facade, and it had already amassed over 500,000 downloads in a matter of just 3 days. It was framed as a prologue, a juicy teaser for an unfolding, real-time tragedy. She used pseudonyms, calling us Arthur and Eleanor, but the specific details of our careers, our home architecture, and our routines were undeniable. Through Vanessa's twisted funhouse mirror lens, Marcus was painted as a covert, narcissistic psychopath who ruthlessly controlled my every move, while I was cast as the tragic, hopelessly blind wife desperately clinging to a rotting marriage. Listening to her publicly dissect my character, calling me painfully naive and pitifully compliant to hundreds of thousands of strangers, I felt a deep, physical revulsion. The truly terrifying part, however, was the cold business plan operating behind the cruelty. Thanks to the encrypted drive my colleague had provided, I had unrestricted access to her email outbox and cloud drafts. The podcast was merely a stepping stone. Vanessa was actively pitching a massive $1 million book deal to a major New York publishing house. Her written proposal boasted about an unprecedented, interactive narrative experience. The publishing executives had told her they were hungry for a bombshell finale, a grand, explosive conclusion to justify a massive upfront financial advance. She wrote back to them, promising a front-row seat to a spectacular, messy, high-society divorce, guaranteeing it would unfold over the next 60 days. She literally referred to my ruined life as her upcoming masterpiece. I was not just a victim, I was her final chapter. I was her golden ticket to early retirement. And she was certainly not waiting for nature to take its course. Reading through her hidden folders, I found the digital footprint of a completely unhinged, criminal escalation. Vanessa knew I was a highly analytical person who would never blow up a solid marriage over a mere verbal rumor from a coffee shop. So, she was quietly manufacturing the hard, undeniable proof. I found active email threads where she was negotiating with a freelance graphic designer on the dark web. She was paying him $500 to forge highly detailed, fake hotel receipts from luxury boutiques downtown, complete with my husband's forged signature and fake timestamps matching her fabricated timeline. She was arranging for a batch of prepaid burner phones to be activated next Tuesday. Her plan was to use those phones to send anonymous, taunting text messages and heavily edited photos directly to my private corporate email at Etherius Dynamics. She was preparing an avalanche of deception. She was going to flood my reality with manufactured dirt until I had no choice but to hire a lawyer and serve Marcus with divorce papers. Sitting there in the dim light of my bedroom, staring at the glowing screen, something inside me fundamentally shifted. The initial, suffocating pain of being betrayed by a woman I had called my sister for 15 long years completely evaporated. In its place, a freezing, razor-sharp clarity took over. My blood stopped boiling and settled into a glacial, terrifying calm. She thought I was Eleanor, the weak, fragile little wife who would shatter under the weight of an anonymous hotel receipt and cry on her shoulder. She had completely forgotten who I actually was. I was a strategy director. I dismantled hostile corporate takeovers for a living. I closed the laptop and took a slow, deep breath. I was not going to call her. I was not going to send a furious text message demanding an explanation, nor was I going to block her number and simply walk away from the friendship. That would be entirely too easy. If Vanessa wanted a psychological thriller to sell to her corporate sponsors and literary agents, I would gladly give her one. But I was no longer the tragic heroine of her pathetic story. I was taking over the director's chair. She wanted to play God with my family for $1 million. So I was going to meticulously, systematically drag her straight down to hell. I was going to build her a beautiful, glittering stage, hand her the microphone she so desperately craved, and then burn the entire theater to the ground while everyone watched. The next morning, the game officially began. I needed to feed Vanessa a narrative so incredibly juicy that she would abandon all caution and basic journalistic vetting. I waited until exactly 1:15 in the afternoon, knowing she usually sat down with her laptop around that time, and hit dial. When she answered, I did not say hello. I just let out a choked, desperate sob. "Vanessa, I found something," I cried into the receiver, making sure my voice trembled violently. I was doing the laundry and checking the pockets of his golf trousers. I found a receipt. Vanessa, a receipt from a jeweler downtown. Nearly $14,000 for a diamond tennis bracelet. He did not give me a bracelet for my birthday. "Oh my God. Allison," Vanessa gasped, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. "Where are you right now? Are you safe? Do you want me to come over?" "No. He just walked into the house." I panicked, injecting raw terror into my tone. I placed the phone gently on the kitchen counter, making sure the microphone was completely unobstructed. Marcus was standing right next to me, holding a script we had drafted the night before over a bottle of expensive red wine. I nodded at him. "Where did you get this?" I screamed at the top of my lungs, slamming my hand against the granite countertop for dramatic effect. "Who is she?" Marcus, who did you buy a $14,000 bracelet for? Marcus took a deep breath and delivered an absolute masterclass performance. You are acting completely crazy. Allison, you have been snooping through my private things. It is a corporate gift for a retiring board member. You paranoid lunatic. Do not lie to me, I shrieked back, throwing a cheap plastic cup into the stainless steel sink so it made a sharp, shattering sound. I am leaving. I cannot look at your face. I snatched the phone and hung up abruptly. I could almost picture Vanessa vibrating with sheer ecstasy in her living room. Predictably, within 48 hours, a brand new emergency episode of Shattered Vows dropped. It was titled The Diamond Confrontation. She recounted the fight almost word for word, heavily embellishing the fake plastic cup shatter into me throwing fine china directly at his head. The episode was a massive hit, pulling in over 2 million listens in its first week alone. Brand new, high-paying sponsors began flocking to her channel to capitalize on the viral drama. She was completely blinded by the sudden influx of cash and attention. She was eating straight out of the palm of my hand, so I decided it was time to feed her the poison pill. During our next tearful phone call, I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I told her I had finally cracked the password on his secondary laptop. I fed her a highly specific, legally dangerous lie. I told her Marcus was embezzling his tech salary and funneling thousands of dollars to his mistress through a deeply obscure, offshore corporate entity. It is called the Obsidian Vanguard Trust, I whispered, enunciating every single syllable perfectly so she would not miss it. He set it up in the Cayman Islands last year. He has been hiding over 75% of his quarterly bonuses in it. I took pictures of the bank routing numbers. Vanessa, it is all real. He is a complete monster. I had made that trust name up entirely in my head while brushing my teeth. It did not exist anywhere on the planet, but I knew Vanessa would not bother to verify it. She was too addicted to the momentum of the story. Sure enough, 3 days later, her distorted voice confidently broadcasted the exact name of the fake trust fund to her millions of subscribers, explicitly accusing my husband of federal financial crimes and tax evasion on top of his infidelity. She had officially crossed the line from petty, anonymous gossip into actionable, malicious defamation. While I was busy feeding the beast, Marcus was operating like a silent, lethal surgeon in the background. Armed with the digital blueprints of Vanessa's empire from my tech colleague, he began systematically dismantling her foundation. He did not go after Vanessa directly. He went after the money. He compiled a massive, meticulously documented legal binder containing the true network addresses, the financial links to her Patreon, and the undeniable proof that the hit podcast Shattered Vows was entirely fabricated. Marcus then had our corporate legal team at Etherius Dynamics quietly reach out to the general counsel of every single brand sponsoring her show. The legal team worked with ruthless efficiency. They contacted the mattress companies, the online therapy applications, and the meal kit delivery services that were currently paying her $20,000 an episode. They sent them certified letters containing irrefutable proof of the fraud. They formally notified the brands that they were actively funding a criminal defamation campaign against a senior corporate director and her husband, and that if they did not immediately sever ties and trigger their morality clauses, they would be named as co-defendants in an impending multi-million-dollar lawsuit. He planted the dynamite perfectly. We just needed Vanessa to light the match. On a dreary Thursday afternoon, I invited Vanessa to lunch at an upscale bistro downtown. I arrived wearing no makeup, dark circles carefully painted under my eyes with a matte eyeshadow, and a deliberately oversized sweater to make myself look frail, exhausted, and utterly defeated. I ordered a simple glass of tap water, stared blankly at the expensive menu, and waited for her to settle into the booth across from me. "I cannot do this anymore, Vanessa," I said, my voice barely above a hollow whisper. My hands shook as I reached for my water glass. "I cannot live in this nightmare. You were right. You were right about everything." Vanessa leaned across the table, her eyes wide with greedy anticipation. "What did you do?" Sweetie, tell me. I hired a lawyer yesterday morning, I confessed, letting a single, practiced tear fall down my cheek. I am filing for divorce on Monday, but I am not just going to hand him the papers quietly. He has humiliated me. Vanessa, he has made a fool out of me. What are you planning? She breathed, practically vibrating with excitement. I am hosting a dinner party this Saturday night, I said, staring deeply into her eyes. I have invited everyone, our parents, all of our college friends, even his colleagues from the firm. I told them it is a celebration for my promotion, but it is not. I have gathered all the evidence, the fake hotel receipts, the trust fund documents, the audio recordings, everything. After dessert, I am going to stand up in front of 50 people and project it all onto a screen. I am going to destroy him in front of everyone he respects. I watched the muscles in her face twitch as she desperately tried to suppress a massive, triumphant smile. She reached out and squeezed my hand, offering me her unwavering support, telling me how incredibly brave I was being, but I could see the frantic calculations running behind her eyes. This was it. This was the explosive, real-time climax she had promised her New York publishers. This was the grand finale. I knew the second she got back to her apartment, she would be scrambling to pack her bag. She would be charging her hidden microphones, testing her concealed recording wires, and preparing to capture every single scream, every gasp, and every tear of my very public humiliation. She was absolutely certain she was walking into the crowning achievement that would cement her legacy and make her wealthy beyond her wildest dreams. She had no idea she was eagerly skipping straight into a slaughterhouse. Saturday evening arrived with a chilling, crisp wind, but inside the sprawling, rented luxury estate in the foothills of the mountains, the air was warm, fragrant, and suffocatingly thick. I had spared absolutely no expense for this event. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over polished marble floors, while a live string quartet played soft, classical music in the corner of the grand ballroom. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with silver trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. It was the perfect picture of high society elegance, but to me, the entire mansion felt like a beautifully decorated, airtight pressure cooker. I could feel the seconds ticking away in my chest. There were exactly 68 guests in attendance. I had cast a wide, deliberate net. My parents were there, chatting quietly by the massive stone fireplace. Marcus's corporate colleagues from Etherius Dynamics stood by the bar. But most importantly, I had invited our entire extended circle of friends, the very people whose private traumas had secretly funded Vanessa's lavish lifestyle over the past year, to ensure Vanessa felt completely at ease and utterly blind to the trap. I had even reached out to a few prominent local media executives and literary agents under the guise of networking for my own company. It was the exact high-profile, wealthy demographic she was desperate to impress. Vanessa arrived at exactly 8:15. She made an entrance worthy of the red carpet, wearing a stunning backless emerald silk dress that clung perfectly to her figure. She spotted me across the room and immediately arranged her face into a mask of deep, agonizing pity. She rushed over, wrapping her arms around my neck in a tight, theatrical embrace. As she pressed against me, I could feel the distinct, hard rectangular shape of a high-end recording device concealed inside her oversized, $3,000 designer clutch. She was gripping that bag so tightly, her knuckles were white. She was ready. She thought she was about to record the magnum opus of her career. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" she whispered in my ear, her voice dripping with fake concern, though I could hear the breathless excitement beneath it. "You do not have to put yourself through this public torture. I am right here for you." "I have to do it," I whispered back, staring blankly over her shoulder. "Everyone needs to know who he really is." She nodded solemnly, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before floating away to mingle with the media executives I had strategically placed near the center of the room. I watched her sip champagne, her eyes darting constantly toward the small elevated stage at the front of the ballroom. She was like a starving wolf waiting for the slaughter to begin. The cocktail hour dragged on agonizingly. Every clink of a glass, every burst of laughter from the oblivious guests felt like sandpaper against my nerves. Finally, when the antique grandfather clock struck 9:30, I knew it was time. I walked slowly up the short flight of stairs to the podium. I had spent 20 minutes in the bathroom prior, rubbing my eyes until they were bloodshot and raw. I carried a massive, thick manila folder in my trembling hands, dropping it heavily onto the wooden stand so the thud echoed through the microphone. The string quartet stopped playing abruptly. The low murmur of conversations died out. Within 10 seconds, the ballroom was plunged into absolute, deafening silence. 68 pairs of eyes locked onto me. I looked out into the crowd and saw Vanessa standing perfectly still in the very front row, holding her designer bag up slightly, her thumb hovering right over where the microphone would be hidden. "Thank you all for being here," I started, letting my voice crack and waver just enough to sell the performance. "I told you this was a celebration, but I lied. I brought you all to this house tonight because my life, the life I thought was perfect, has been completely dismantled by someone I trusted with my entire soul." A collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother covered her mouth. I saw Vanessa bite her bottom lip, her eyes wide with greedy, intoxicating thrill. She was practically vibrating. "I have the proof right here," I continued, tapping the thick folder. "I have the receipts, the bank statements, the hidden accounts. I know exactly what has been going on in the shadows. And instead of just walking away, I decided it was time to let everyone hear the undeniable truth." I did not pull a fake hotel receipt out of the folder. I did not say Marcus's name. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small black remote control, and pressed the single red button in the center. Behind me, a massive, motorized projector screen descended from the ceiling with a low mechanical hum. The lights in the ballroom dimmed automatically. The high-definition speakers mounted around the room crackled to life, but it was not a video of my husband. It was a pristine, crystal-clear audio recording of a phone call. It was Vanessa's actual voice, completely unedited and undistorted, speaking in a brisk, incredibly arrogant tone. "Listen, David," Vanessa's recorded voice echoed off the marble walls, filling every corner of the silent room. "I told you, the book deal needs to include a $1 million advance. The Shattered Vows podcast is peaking, and I am handing you the ultimate finale on a silver platter. Yes, the Allison and Marcus divorce. No, she has no idea. I literally made up a mistress and fed her the location of a fake trust fund. The idiot believed every single word. I am pushing her to host a massive confrontation party this weekend where she is going to serve him papers in front of everyone. It is going to be absolute carnage. I am recording the entire meltdown for the final episode. Just have the contracts ready to sign on Monday." The audio file clicked off. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom did not just freeze. It instantly shattered into a million jagged pieces of ice. The silence was so profound, so absolute, that I could hear the frantic, rapid pounding of my own heart. No one breathed. No one moved a muscle. Every single person in that room slowly turned their heads to look at Vanessa. The transition of her face was a masterpiece of human terror. The faux, sympathetic, eager smile she had worn just seconds prior completely dissolved, leaving her features sagging and hollow. The blood drained from her face so fast, her skin turned the color of old parchment. She looked like a decaying corpse standing in a glittering emerald dress. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a suffocating fish, unable to formulate a single syllable. Her designer clutch slipped from her paralyzed, trembling fingers and hit the marble floor with a loud, sickening crack. Before the shock in the room could mutate into chaos, the heavy oak doors at the side of the stage swung open. Marcus stepped out from the shadows. He did not look like a man whose life was falling apart. He looked like an apex predator. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his expression completely calm, cold, and utterly detached. He was not alone. Behind him, two members of his private corporate security team wheeled out a sleek metal cart stacked high with thick, black-bound portfolios. Without saying a word, Marcus calmly walked down the stairs and approached the front row of guests. He handed the first black portfolio to the woman who had suffered a miscarriage last year. He handed the second one to the man who had struggled with bankruptcy. He moved methodically through the frozen crowd, distributing the heavy binders to every single mutual friend and family member present. Inside these packets, Marcus finally spoke, his deep voice carrying a lethal, unwavering authority. You will find the comprehensive digital footprint of the Shattered Vows podcast. You will find the exact IP routing addresses connecting the uploads to the router in Vanessa's living room. You will find the offshore financial logs detailing exactly how many thousands of dollars she was paid by sponsors to broadcast your private tragedies to the internet. And on page 40, you will find the original, unedited text messages she manipulated to make fools out of every single person standing in this room. The collective realization hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. The bewildered gasps turned into sharp, furious intakes of breath. The sound of dozens of thick binders being frantically ripped open echoed through the estate. Vanessa was completely surrounded, physically boxed in by the very people she had secretly monetized and destroyed. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. The meticulously crafted web of lies she had spun to build her empire had just become her own inescapable cage. As the furious murmurs of the crowd escalated into shouts, Vanessa's eyes darted wildly toward the grand mahogany exit doors. She took a frantic step backward, her breath hitching in her throat, preparing to bolt. "Do not leave just yet, Vanessa," I called out, my voice echoing sharply through the microphone. "We are not finished." I gestured to the side of the stage. 3 men and 1 woman, all impeccably dressed in dark, tailored business suits, walked out to join me. They were the senior legal counsel for Aetherist Dynamics. The lead attorney, a tall, imposing man, stepped up to the podium and adjusted his glasses. "Vanessa," he stated, his tone devoid of any human warmth, "by publicly broadcasting fabricated statements regarding the whereabouts of a senior corporate director and her spouse during a declared state of emergency, you have not only committed gross defamation, but you have also implicated Aetherist Dynamics in a severe corporate security breach. You claimed he was at a bar. The truth is quite different." He signaled to the audiovisual technician in the back. The projector screen shifted from the audio file to a black and white, time-stamped corporate security video. The date and time were clearly displayed in the corner Tuesday, 10:30 in the evening. The footage showed Marcus and me huddled together on a deflated air mattress inside the highly secure windowless server room of our corporate headquarters, fast asleep while the blizzard raged outside, the ultimate ironclad alibi. The final thread of Vanessa's elaborate web snapped. There was no spin, no manipulation, and no lie clever enough to escape the absolute, crushing weight of concrete legal evidence. She was stripped completely bare in front of everyone. Right at that exact second, the silence of her defeat was pierced by a violent, continuous buzzing. Vanessa's phone, still tucked inside the designer clutch she had dropped, began vibrating relentlessly against the marble floor. Notifications lit up the screen in rapid succession. Marcus's preemptive strike had detonated. The New York publishing house had just sent an automated email terminating her $1 million book deal, citing the morality and fraud clauses. Immediately following that, her inbox flooded with urgent, aggressive legal notices from her podcast sponsors. They were officially demanding immediate refunds and filing multi-million-dollar lawsuits for brand damage and breach of contract. Her legs finally gave out. Vanessa collapsed onto her knees right there in the center of the ballroom. She looked up, desperate tears streaming down her face, silently begging for someone, anyone, to help her. But the people surrounding her, the friends whose pain she had so casually sold for profit, simply looked down at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. One by one, they turned their backs and walked away, leaving her weeping alone on the cold floor. Completely crushed under the weight of insurmountable debt and total social annihilation. A week later, the storm had entirely passed. Marcus and I stood together on the private balcony of our home, feeling the gentle evening breeze. I held a glass of dark red wine in one hand and my phone in the other. I took a slow sip, enjoying the profound, beautiful quiet of our life. I looked down at the glowing screen and let out a soft, satisfied smirk. The top trending article on a major news network flashed brightly. It detailed the spectacular, catastrophic downfall of the woman they were officially calling America's most unethical gossip. I locked my phone, leaned my head against my husband's shoulder, and watched the sun set over the mountains. Thank you all so much for listening to the end of this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from today. If you enjoyed today's journey and felt satisfied by the ending, please consider helping us out with just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by using the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment. Your support allows us to pay our dedicated staff so they can feed their families and continue creating even better stories for you. Have a wonderful day and stay safe.